We were live now.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank you once again for tuning in to one of our Ranger Chats. My name is Roy Wood, and I'm the Chief of Interpretation for Katmai National Park and Preserve.
Hi, and I'm Mike Fitz. I'm the Media Ranger here at Katmai.
And today what we want to do is talk once again about the bears of Brooks Camp and what's going on in their lives right now. This is the second of our Disney Nature Chats called Wildlife Wednesdays. And so we want to thank all of you that are joining us for the first time as part of that program. And if you would like to get questions to us, there are a couple of ways you can do it. One way, you can send a Twitter question to us by using the hashtag AskRangerRoy, or you can go to explore.org's website and enter your questions in the chat window there, and someone will pore over those questions and then forward them on to us. When you see us reaching forward, we're probably grabbing the iPad here, which is how we receive the questions. So sometimes one of us will be looking down while the other one's talking. Sometimes we'll be looking both together, probably deciding who's going to do it. But that's how we receive the questions. Now, before we actually get started answering the questions today, what we'd like to do is just give sort of a brief overview of what's going on right now in the lives of the bears at Brooks Camp. Now, we're not at Brooks Camp right now. We are standing in our office in King Salmon, and so we have only been able to watch what the goings on at Brooks Camp like all of you have been able to using the webcams. And if Mike steps just a little bit to the side, you can see we've got one of the cameras up here behind us. And if we see something interesting going on here, we may talk about it. But for the most part, we know there's a delay, that what you are seeing on your camera at the same time we're pointing to it's not the same. So we're not going to sit here and just narrate what's being shown on the screen. We will try to talk in general about what's going on in the bears' lives right now, and then hopefully get to a lot of your questions today. We usually manage to get at least 20 of them in, so hopefully today we'll be able to do that as well. So as I said, we're not at Brooks Camp right now. Mike and I left Brooks Camp on Monday afternoon after we did our Monday afternoon chat, and so we can give you an update sort of with our on-the-ground perspective up to the point where we left. After that, it's been watching the cams and getting sort of the reports from viewers like you guys. You know, one of the wonderful things about these webcams is that they are out there watching these bears. I was going to say 24/7, but it's not quite 24/7 now because it does get dark this time of the year. But they're out there from all day, all daylight hours, watching the camera or watching the bears, and we have so many helpful bear cam viewers on there that are snapping pictures of the bears and sharing them with us and with others. So it's been really wonderful that we don't have to sit there as park rangers the whole day to really see what's going on, and neither do you, because there's this whole community of people that are watching the bears and sharing the really fascinating things that they've been seeing. And one of the
Well, yeah, and what we've been seeing over the past few days in the cams, I think, is fairly typical for this time of the year. A lot of bears fattening up on salmon, and a lot of bears sleeping. I think those are the two main things that you're going to see at this time of the year. At this time of the year, their metabolism is going to start to gear down fairly soon once they approach the time of the year where they go into their dens. So as their metabolism gears down, they're going to be resting even more and more, and especially once they get very close to their denning time, in November, then they're going to be sleeping probably more than they're eating in many cases. So their metabolism slows and slows and slows as they get into that towards that state of hibernation. But really, that's not going to happen for most of those bears until November. But you're starting to see, I think, the two main activities for the bears around here. They're not really doing too much of anything else except eating and sleeping. Occasionally playing, I think, if you happen to see some well-fed bears. But most of the time, even if they have a full stomach, they're going to be sleeping.
And this period is called hyperphagia, which is just a big fancy word for they eat all the time. That's their sole purpose, is to try to eat and eat and eat as much as they possibly can. And really, the whole summer that we've been watching, the whole salmon spectacle that we've been watching, revolves around that very point. Try to get as much food in you, as much fattening food in you as possible, because you're going to need that for hibernation. And we see them going absolutely crazy over salmon in July. They'll fight over them. They're standing on the lip of the falls, catching them in midair. It's really fun to watch, but probably even more so this time of the year is important, because this is their last chance to put on that extra 50 pounds of fat, 75 pounds of fat, 100 pounds of fat that they need to ensure that they can make it through hibernation. And I do notice that there is a bear walking behind me. They say that you should never ignore the animal that's behind you when you're doing a program like this. So it is there. It's a little different for us. We're used to having actual bears behind us that we're always looking over our shoulders while we're talking. But you'll see that this bear, at least on our view here, is just walking the shore of Naknek Lake looking for any of these dead or dying salmon. And that fact that these salmon are dead and or dying really is the great equalizer for the bears out there. In July, you have to be pretty good to catch a fish as it's jumping up over the falls. You have to be pretty good to chase a fish down in the river and pounce on it. You have to be pretty good to dive under the water like Bear 402 does to get fish back out. But this time of the year, when the fish are just dead and lying there on the side of the river, you don't have to be good at all. I mean, you don't even have to have the nose of a bear to find those fish, because I could smell them out there. You can smell dead salmon everywhere. So a bear just walks around sniffing the air. You'll see that a lot, and they can go right up to these salmon and just pick them up. Mike could do it. You saw him do it perhaps a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, even I can do it. So. But and I think we mentioned this in one of the previous chats, but it's worth reiterating too. At this time of the year, the bears really can't afford to make any mistakes gathering food. They can make mistakes back in July. If they're going to a salmon stream where there happens to be few salmon and they're not catching a lot, back in July, that's okay. But right now, that's not okay. They definitely need to eat as much as humanly possible. So, or as, I guess, Ursine possible, not humanly possible. Yeah, barely possible. So they can't make any mistakes right now. And that's a big reason why, the visitor facilities at Brooks Camp closes at this time of the year, because we don't want hundreds of people around there potentially disturbing these animals at the most critical time of the year.
So the first question that we received, since we've been talking about bears on the spit and lying around a lot, is that have we been seeing Bear 409, the bear nicknamed Bead Nose, on the spit? Is that who?
Earlier in the day...
I don't think this one is.
Yeah, this one's not. So earlier in the day, she was there. And if you're new to the cams, you're not following the bears all that much, number 409 has 3 yearling cubs, and they're fairly big right now, and they're fairly blonde too. So she has 3 fairly large cubs. She also has some pretty blonde-tipped ears as well, and for many people, a very distinctive face. So if you happen to see that bear, you might be able to recognize her from day to day. She's quite often seen on the cams, and I think she was out there earlier in the day. There's at least 2 other bears that frequently sleep in that area. I shouldn't say at least two, but there's many, but at least 2 that I happen to recognize. One of them happens to be number 94, who's another adult female, and she kind of has blonde-tipped ears, but she doesn't have cubs. And then another one is number 410, is kind of just a really fat bear, probably the fattest female I think that we know about along the Brooks River right now, and a whole bunch of other bears like to sleep in that area. So that's a pretty comfortable spot for a lot of them. They're not really disturbed by people in that area out on the edge of the lake. And for some reason, we had a lot of biting insects, still hanging around until the first week of September, second week of September. So when they're out on the edge of the lake like that and they get a little bit of a breeze, then that helps to relieve them from some of those biting insects.
So Mike has thrown out some numbers for bears and some nicknames for bears, and I did the same thing. And we get those numbers because we have bear monitors, bear biologists that watch the bears all summer, and when they can identify them, they give them numbers. And I won't go into a lot of detail there because they've just posted a video interview that we did with one of our bear monitors over the weekend, and you can review that on the, I think it's on the YouTube channel, correct?
Yeah,
it's on the Explorer's YouTube channel, so you can watch it there and learn more about it. But if you want to keep track of the bears that you've seen and know the nicknames and the numbers for them, you can download a PDF from the park website, or you can go to iTunes and type in Brown Bears at Brooks Camp, and you can get an interactive book if you have an iPad that lists many of the bears that you're going to see on the falls. It's kind of washed out, I know, there, but it's got, 50, 60 different bears in it. Their life histories, tells a lot about them. Both the PDF and both the interactive iBook on iTunes are free, so if you want to continue to learn about these bears, grab those books, and both of those are going to be updated in the coming weeks. So keep that in mind too. Back to the bear that was sleeping on the beach. We did see Bead Nose doing that earlier, and the question had a second part to it, and that it was basically, was she just too sleepy to move out of the rain? There aren't many places you can go when it's raining pretty heavily. The trees don't shed a lot of moisture. They don't have caves or anything that they retire to. So they just lay around
and they're
in
in
the rain.
they're in the water almost constantly when they're not sleeping. So I mean, they're so massive that they really don't cool down very easily at all. So they just sort of tolerate it. You know, us, if we happen to go out and lay down in the rain, it would be quite an uncomfortable experience, if not dangerous experience after a while. But the bears, they can tolerate it pretty well. So when they're out there on the beach, they don't really seem to mind very much sleeping in the rain.
Question number 2 is to us they're wanting to know if we're going to be teaming together to do these again next year. And so I think the simple answer to that is yes. We may not both do both of them at the same time. You know, there are going to be times when I'm not at camp or I'm not available, and Mike will do them by himself, and there'll be times when I'm doing it by myself. But yeah, I think you can count on more of this next year. And you know, each year that we've done this, we've expanded our abilities a little bit, and you know, maybe next year we'll get a slightly better grasp of some of the technology that was baffling us a little bit this time. I mean, it's amazing that we can get any kind of picture out of the wild like we're able to do now, but the shortcomings of our technology sometimes are pretty apparent, like on Sunday when we kept getting cut off because we had a flaky Wi-Fi signal. And just, you know, those things are going to happen. Somebody flipped a switch on us on Monday and killed the power when we were doing one. So we hope to get some of that ironed out. We might expand the format and do slightly different things. Let us know the sort of things that you'd like to see us try to do, and we'll try to make it happen as much as we can. You know, we get a lot of help from Explore. We get a lot of help from the people that put the network together, and I know we're going to be talking about those things over the winter. So back to Mike and I, most likely together, unless we get cabin fever this year. We don't live together in a cabin or anything, but winters here can be kind of long. You almost wish you could just hibernate the whole time.
Well, some people do. I got a
he likes to go out and ice skate more than I do.
I got a big fat tire bike now to play with.
So question number 3, the cub from the other day. I'm assuming this means, oh yeah, I read the whole question.
Mm-hmm.
The cub from the other day is still on people's minds. And what the question is referring to is that on Friday night, we had a report of an injured and possibly dying bear cub at Lake Brooks, which is about a mile from the lower river viewing area. So a number of us trekked on up there in the dark and in the rain to go investigate this bear cub that was injured. And it indeed was injured. We examined it from a distance. We had binoculars. We took photos and video of it. And it was pretty obvious to us that the bear was not going to survive the night due to the injuries that it had. And we didn't handle the bear. Park policy is that we always allow nature to take its course. The only reason that we would typically go in and intervene, and this has never even been an issue at Brooks Camp, but if the injury to the bear was caused by one of our activities, like perhaps it darted out in front of our vehicle as we were driving down the road and we ran over it and broke a leg. In that circumstance, we may choose to try to capture the bear and take it someplace and have it rehabilitated. Now, the problem with doing that is it's very unlikely that the animal would ever come back into the wild. Even if we could get it completely healthy, at that point, after spending potentially a year, or up to a year, getting rehabilitated in captivity, there's a real risk that it would have lost a lot of its innate fear of humans. And we wouldn't want to have a bear back out at Brooks Camp that looked to us as a source of food. We keep all the human food away from the bears at Brooks Camp because we don't want our scent and the scent of food to be commingled. But if for a year your food is always being, tossed into a cage or put into a bowl, if you will, by human handlers, it's going to maybe make that connection and it's going to see people. So it probably wouldn't never have been able to come back. So that's why we didn't intervene, and it's just the policy to allow nature to take its course. Sometimes it's beautiful and wonderful nature. Sometimes it's kind of scary and unpleasant nature. And for most of us, watching a baby animal die is not something that we find pleasant, but it is something that is natural.
And with the other part of that question is, well, why was the cub collected at all if our policy is not to intervene? And we really felt that it was just too valuable of an opportunity to collect that animal and investigate maybe its cause of death. Since no one actually saw what happened, if we really saw, of course, a bear maybe attack that cub and kill it, then we would know for sure. But I think the park decided it was too valuable of a scientific opportunity to pass up, so they collected it, and then they were able to do a necropsy on it to see if there were any surprises. And there really weren't any surprises, I don't think, but that was the main reason why we did happen to collect it.
Well, and also, we didn't handle the bear because it was alive, and we didn't want to stress it. So we were viewing it from a distance, and we could see only 2 wounds, 2 puncture holes, which also could have been made by a small caliber bullet or an arrow or something. It was just 2 punctures. So we needed to take a look at it once it died and make sure that someone wasn't up. It's hard to think of why somebody would do this, but someone wasn't up there shooting a bear cub and then leaving it. So there was the scientific side, not knowing why this animal was killed, how it died, what the injuries were, and why wasn't it eaten? If another bear killed it, why didn't it eat it? And we didn't get answers to a lot of that, but we do know at least that it was a large animal that bit it, probably another bear, and that it appears to have been shaken so vigorously, so violently that it broke its spine, and that's why it couldn't walk anymore. So pretty horrible thing for all of us to go witness, but I think everybody felt good in the decision that we allowed nature to take its course up to that point, and we just hope we don't have to see it again anytime soon. So we have a question about people that fish there with the bears. Well, fishing has been a long part of the history of Brooks Camp and Katmai. In fact, it's the reason why most of the lodges were originally constructed in Katmai, is for fly-in sport fishing. And I know on the cam sometimes it can look like the people are right on top of the bears, and indeed sometimes they do. Sometimes the bear surprises them, it comes out of the grass, they didn't see it. Other times they're in the river, the bear keeps moving down and they can't get out of the way fast enough. Sometimes there are people that truly are trying to push the limits of what we allow. And so we wish that everybody out there could always give the bears the space that they need. And that's why we have the distance regulation. And when we know that somebody is out there and they are not adhering to that, we call law enforcement, and law enforcement rangers will try to intercept them and talk to them. We don't usually go running out in the river trying to track them down, but they do often try to catch up with them and talk to them about it later.
And I should mention too that without drawing the answer maybe out too long, the park in the past has actually proposed sport fishing closures for the Brooks River, and it did meet with a tremendous amount of opposition, as you can imagine, from sport fishing groups, sport fishing lodges in the area as well. So the park right now has decided that sport fishing and bear watching can coexist on the Brooks River, and as long as people are behaving appropriately around the animals, then both of those things are allowed to exist.
And also, one last thing there is that everybody we see out there is not fishing. There are people that are wandering around taking photographs too. So it's not really that it's a fisher person problem. We call them anglers. Angler problem. It's just a distance rule problem. That same distance rule can happen when somebody is crossing the bridge or somebody is swimming in the lake. And the cameras just don't usually see that, and because we ask the camera operators really not to focus on people that are close enough that you can identify, because people on vacation don't want to think that they're being spied on by 10,000 people around the world that are watching them, perhaps. So we have a really good question here about yesterday they observed 2 bears play fighting, and then they ended up, after play fighting, eating together. And it says, in fact, one was seen giving the other one a fish. Were these 2 subadult siblings?
Well, I don't know. I didn't see them. Maybe I saw just a little bit, but I wasn't able to see like the whole interaction. As far as like the sharing goes, I think that's really thought to lie outside of the bear's capacities. So in many cases, what looks like sharing is that one bear just happens to drop a few scraps of fish in the water, and it tolerates the close proximity of another bear, and that other bear is just in the right place to pick up the scraps. I saw that a lot with 2 bears up at Brooks Falls several years ago. One was number 747, who's really good at catching fish. He's still at the falls. He's still along the Brooks River this year. And he was, he's a real big bear. He's real dominant. He can basically choose his fishing spots where he wants to fish. So he would catch up a lot of fish. And then there was an older bear that was less dominant, fairly low in the hierarchy because he was aging, very, very thin. And 747 would tolerate the close proximity of this bear. So 747 would catch a fish. He'd walk back maybe to the island downstream of the falls. He'd start to eat his fish. Then this other bear, number 16, Cinnamon, would come over and sit there and wait for 747 to leave any fish behind. And from many people's perspectives, it did look like 747 was sharing fish with him, but basically he was just leaving scraps behind, and the other bear was just in the right place to do that. So I can't really say for sure what happened in that interaction, because I think I did see a couple bears playing, but I wasn't able to really watch the whole interaction. I had some other things I was working on at the time. But it really is thought for bears to lie outside of, or sharing to lie outside of a bear's capacities. So, and whether they were siblings or not, we don't know that either. But sometimes siblings will hang together for maybe a year, but not if it looked like older bears, older subadult bears. It probably was likely that they weren't siblings.
We've talked about this on a bunch of occasions about bears not really sharing, and that bears are inherently selfish. So we didn't see it. You can never actually get into the mind of the bear that is performing some action. But time and time again, what we see is not generosity. It's just I don't need it anymore. It's not worth the fight. I'm done with it anyway. You can have
the jawbones of the fish.
Right.
I don't want to eat that. It's hard to.
And sometimes on the cams it's hard to see, but they'll eat what appears to be half of the fish, but what they're leaving behind is the head with the gill plates and
the intestines
and swim bladder and stuff like that. That really bears will turn their noses up at a lot of that stuff even when they're hungry. It's just not the kind of nutrients that they're looking for. It fills their bellies up, but it doesn't fatten them necessarily. So that's what it's all about. It's getting fat as you possibly can. And when we say fat, I mean, some of our bears out there probably exceed 1,200 pounds right now. And a good portion of a 1,200-pound bear, like 300 to 400 pounds, is fat. Just really, really obese animals. But that's important because that's what gets them through the winter hibernation. And then the next question that's up is one of the most fun ones to talk about. The person wants to know about the bears and how their body functions change and stop when they're in the den during hibernation, and then they apologize. Sorry if that's gross.
And I guess it's really not, because they're not urinating and they're not defecating in the den. So
and we don't shy away from gross, as you know. We've talked about that already.
Yeah, I'll pick up dead fish in the water. It's not that big of a deal, really. So yeah, when a bear is hibernating, they don't eat, they don't drink, and they don't go to the bathroom either. So most of their bodily functions slow down. Not all of them really stop, although their digestive system basically shuts down at that point, because there's really nothing passing through. I mean, when they go into the den, their digestive tract is virtually empty at that point in time. So they really wouldn't have a need to pass anything through their system to get up and to go to the bathroom. In most cases, they would, with a lot of mammals would still need to urinate for that long period of time, because the ammonias that build up through our systems would eventually end up poisoning us and killing us. But with a bear, they don't have to worry about that. They're recycling the nitrogens in that ammonia to help build their muscle mass and their organ tissues and keep them in a healthy state for the whole entire winter. So it's really an amazing process that they happen to go through when they're in their dens. But yeah, if you're wondering if they happen to be defecating in the den or urinating, they're not. So the dens are pretty clean overall. They just smell like dirt, the ones that I've been in.
Yeah, the whole act of denning for bears, that hibernation period, is really phenomenal. That they can go in, not eat, not drink, subsist totally on their stored fat, and then come out in the late spring, early summer, and not have complete muscle atrophy. Their muscles haven't gone weak on them. They can still hike great distances. They don't develop heart disease from this binge eating that they do in the summer in preparation for hibernation. So truly incredible stuff that has scientists eager to unlock these secrets, and there are people studying them at several universities, just trying to figure out what we could do to provide the same sort of muscle reaction to lying dormant that bears have. One of the hurdles in traveling to other planets is, how do you have an astronaut sitting on his or her butt for years at a time trying to get to this other planet with reduced or no gravity, nothing to really work out against, and get to that other planet and not just be flab. And if you could somehow figure out how to convince a bear to get on a rocket ship, they could do it. They don't lose that muscle mass. They don't come out of their dens weak. They wouldn't come out of this voyage to another planet weak. So scientists are really fascinated by a number of things with regards to their kidneys, their heart, their muscles, the fat metabolism. Really, really interesting stuff. And if you go on the internet and do a search, you can find some university studies on that. And we poke around every once in a while and look at those. Really cool.
Yeah, and the astronauts have to exercise vigorously when they're in outer space to maintain muscle mass and bone density. So I think, yeah, it's quite remarkable what bears can do.
And bears do nothing
they
except
do nothing.
sleep.
So we have another question coming up, and this person wants to warn us that they may sound anthropomorphic, but the question is, how do bears experience the death of a sibling or cub? Does their behavior change? And if it does, for how long? It doesn't really seem like they have the capacity to mourn either. It seems like in the experiences that I've had where I've been around maybe a mother bear and she happens to lose a cub, it seems like she's really worked up and she's sort of hyper alert for a period of time. But after that, maybe just within a few minutes, she just sort of starts to go about her business. It seems like they forget about they don't forget necessarily, but they put it out of their mind. They say, I can't worry about this. I have much more important things to worry about.
Imagine you've got 3 cubs and one of them does get killed by another bear, or it drowns crossing the river, or something happens to it and it dies. It would not be in the best interest of that mother or the surviving members of her family to sit there with that dead cub and to mourn that dead cub, because every minute she's not looking for food reduces her chance of surviving in the winter. And while they do get really stressed out right when it happens, I've seen them running around frantically after a tragedy for a few minutes. They seem to get right back to normal pretty quickly. And the same with when we've seen the siblings of the deceased one, they're stressed out, probably taking their cues from their mother, who's stressed out, but then they also get right back into eating. The only thing that I see that maybe reflects the family relationship is that I have not known a mother I'm sure it's happened, but I have not ever seen a mother eat her own dead cub, or I haven't seen that. So there is something there. We know that they sometimes abandon them when they can't keep up. They don't just keep turning around and going back. But so there's some recognition, but it doesn't extend into a mourning period like human beings have, and perhaps some other animals have. I know some birds that mate for life seem to have more issues with that than bears do. The next question, and I have no idea about this, is there a special plant that animals eat that help them heal their wounds?
Oh, well,
you're not sharing it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Second part is, do they get infections like we do? And yes, they do get them, but they appear to have a better immune system than we do, because they get obviously these nasty infections on their skin when they have scars that have been scratched open in a fight, and you'll see them oozing. In fact, there's one bear right now, at 83, 868.
Maybe both of them. Well, 83 has one.
One bear that you see when he's looking up at the falls, you'll see this white streak coming down the side of his head. It's been there for weeks, and that is a wound that has gotten infected, and it's like Elmer's glue draining down the side of his face. It's white and thick, and you can see it on the webcams if you watch. So they do get infected. They do, in most cases, seem to fight off the infection pretty effectively. Wounds that would send us to the hospital, probably never to return, they seem to do well with, or not well, but they seem to overcome.
Yeah, and sometimes they have, just egregious wounds. I've seen bears with wounds so deep that it actually cuts through not only the skin layer, but the fatty layer and down into the muscle. And in fact, I think there was at least one bear this summer who had a big wound on his back in 2012, and I couldn't even see that wound this summer at all. So it's kind of remarkable, their ability to heal and bounce back from injuries. Because certainly if I experienced anything even close to that, I would likely be in the hospital from it. And to get back to the plant question, I'm sure that when they feel the need to balance their diet in some way, they may go seek out different food sources than just salmon. We will see them, of course, eating berries. We'll see them grazing on grasses occasionally, and they may do that because they need some other nutrients in those plants that perhaps maybe salmon just doesn't happen to provide. So they're maybe getting medicine in different ways. Of course, they're not actively thinking about it. But when you eat nothing but cheese for a whole week, you're gonna eventually your body's gonna tell you, you know what, I don't want any more cheese. It may be giving me enough calories,
Really?
but I'm gonna want
It's
something.
a lot of cheese
Yeah.
before I get to that.
Okay. Well, maybe you don't have to eat it for a whole week.
Okay.
So, but yeah, you eat a lot of one thing. Eventually, your body's going to tell you, "Hey, I need to eat something else." And it's the same thing with the bears, I'd imagine too. And so we have a couple more questions in our queue here. And the next one is: if humans wander near a bear's den in a hibernation spot, will the bear wake up and become combative?
Well, there are a couple of things to talk about with that. Typically, humans don't accidentally wander near a bear's hibernation site because the bears, at least in this part of the world, will den pretty high up the mountains around here. What was it, like 1,800 to 3,500 feet or something like that in the study?
It was. I think the average elevation was 1,300 feet for a bear's den, and almost all dens were below 3,000 feet,
Okay,
if not
below
all of them.
3,000.
Yeah.
So but it's up a ways because like Brooks Camp is only at about 60 feet in elevation. So it's not very high. You're not likely to just stumble across in this area a den. However, if you do, they can wake up. They do true hibernation, but they have the ability to wake up. It's just not something that they commonly do unless it's been warm. I'm sure if you went in the den and messed with it, it might wake up.
So, I should maybe move on. I think you said it pretty well. So
Okay, but
yeah.
we're at the half-hour point.
Yeah.
We always at the halfway point also
Uh-huh.
like to welcome anybody that's just joined us and introduce ourselves again. My name is Roy Wood, and I'm the Chief of Interpretation for Katmai National Park and Preserve.
I'm Mike Fitz. I'm the media ranger here.
And this is our second of the Disney Nature Wildlife Wednesday chats that we're doing with Explore.org. And we want to welcome all of you that have just arrived. If you have questions you'd like to ask us, there are two ways you can get your questions to us. One is to use Twitter and use the hashtag AskRangerRoy. The second is to go to Explore.org's website, log in there, and you can post your question. There's somebody at Explore.org that's watching all of these questions come in and is picking the ones to forward to us. We have gotten now to question 9, so we're about on schedule. We usually get about 20 of these in before the hour is up. So if you've got those questions, fire them off to us, and hopefully we'll get to yours.
And the next question that we have on our list here is asks if humans wander. Oh, excuse me, we did that one. Can you talk about brown bear vocalizations or information that reveals studies about them?
So this is yours for sure,
Okay.
because we were trying to do this on Saturday, and he woofed so loudly he broke the camcorder, and we had to start again.
So first of all, I should start with the brown bears are generally quiet. We don't really hear them making a lot of noise. They really only vocalize when they're in stressful situations for the most part. The exception to that I can think of, there's maybe two. There's if a cub is begging food off of mom, or if an adult bear is begging food off of another bear. And sometimes we'll hear that. And I really wish I could recreate a cub's begging noise. Because sometimes
Wow.
sometimes it's just like a whimper when they want a nurse or something like that. But in many cases, it's kind of like a gremlin sort of noise where they're maybe fighting with one another, trying to get food off of mom, and she's not sharing.
So we'll go back to like a stress.
Yeah.
There are different kinds of stress vocalizations. So give us an example of woofing.
So a woof is just going to be a big expulsion of air, and that's going to be a big. So if you're walking through the woods and you happen to hear something like that with just a big expulsion of air, then that's a sign to you that you should stop and you should be hyper alert in that moment. You should really be looking around to see where that bear is, whether or not it's directing its attention towards you. Sometimes bears stress each other out, and you'll just be walking along la-di-da, and you'll hear this woofing, and that's because there's two bears off in the woods that you didn't happen to see before. But if a wolf is directed towards you, then you really need to be hyper alert, and it's definitely a warning.
So another one, which sounds similar to that, is I'm a cub, and I'm getting too far away from mother. What might I hear?
You might hear something like.
And so that, if you can't hear it on the chat, that's like a woof, only shorter and a bunch of them together. And that can mean, well, to the bears, to the cubs, it's almost their whole language with their mother is just variations on that. But you hear that to get up the tree, get down the tree, get over here, get away from here. Um, I mean, it's
danger
so,
in the area.
so
something
commonly
like that.
heard with mother and cubs. You'll also, if the female is stressed, you might also hear another sound. Can you do jaw popping?
I can't do jaw popping.
I can't do
wish
jaw
I
popping
could,
either. But jaw popping is this sort of like back of the throat, like I'd say, can't
And
even do it.
it's and they really do clack their teeth together. It does sound like a very hollow popping noise that they're actually making.
That's often when a bear is stressed because we're too close to it or another bear is too close to it. It's not communicating like to its cubs. It's just broadcasting, I'm upset. There's danger here, and that's another very distinctive one. If you hear that jaw popping, that you should stop what you're doing, look around you, try to figure out where the problem is. If you hear the rapid, you should turn around and look and see if you can see where the cubs are, because you're probably too close to the cubs.
Mm-hmm.
And the cubs may be up in a tree right next to you, but look around, see where the danger might be. And then there is bellowing, like the roaring, the sort of classic bear noise that they always dub in movies before the bear attacks somebody. But that usually you don't hear that. You don't hear those big, deep roars except when they're squabbling over fish or for brief periods when they're fighting. And I can't do them. I don't.
No,
I
can't either.
People in the office would think there was something wrong if we managed to pull that one off anyway.
So yeah, and then oftentimes you'll hear them growling at one another, really when they're body posturing. So when they turn, up at the falls, maybe competing over a fishing spot, for instance, that's really when you're going to hear the bears growling at one another. They'll be opening their mouths wide. They'll be showing each other how big and tough they happen to be. But in almost all situations, they're just quiet. And most of the time, even up at the falls, and they're competing over fishing spots, they're pretty quiet. One bear just sees another bigger one coming its way, and it just says, "Hey, I don't want to mess with this thing," and it just gets out of the way. And I don't know if you wanted to recreate the begging noise, because I think the other day you tried that.
I don't think I did it very well. I might need to try to recreate the begging noise sometime when I'm not live, because when I don't get it right, then I might need to drink some water and try to get it there. But maybe I'll try to do that.
But occasionally, adult bears they'll vocalize towards another bear with another bear when another bear has fish. But again, their bears aren't sharing food in any way.
Well, if you want to hear what it sounds like, it's Chewbacca from Star Wars. Really, they actually used a captive bear for part of the sound of Chewbacca. So that growling when he's angry, that's very similar to that begging noise of a bear. And as much as I wanted to as a 12-year-old boy to make Chewbacca sound, I could never pull it off on command then, and I'm certainly not capable of doing it now.
And before we move on, there's one more vocalization that I shouldn't forget to mention. And this has to do with cubs too. And when cubs are nursing, they're feeling content, then they'll start to purr. And it does sound almost just like a cat purring. I've only been fortunate.
Only loud.
Yeah, it's really loud. It kind of carries across a good distance. I've only been fortunate enough to hear it a handful of times. Even though I've seen cubs nursing quite often at Brooks Camp, I haven't really been able to hear the purring noise. So they don't do it all the time, but that's another vocalization.
And often it's noisy. They're down by the river, or there's airplanes taking off, and we don't get to hear it really clearly. We should try to find that sound file. I mean, I know where the sound file is, and maybe post it someplace so people can hear it. It's not perfectly clean because you can hear the Brooks Camp generator in the background. And then you'll hear this other mechanical, almost sounding purring noise that the cubs make. It's pretty amazing. Cubs and the mother. So let's see. Question number 11. I guess I can read it here so I don't have to lean in. Question 11 is, since there are fewer bears at Brooks Camp this year, does that mean that the salmon numbers are down?
Well, salmon numbers do definitely have a major impact on bears. And we know that I think the last statistic I read, and I haven't run the numbers to update this, but from 1988 to 2008, the 20-year average escapement for the Naknek drainage, and it was 1.8 million fish. And I should explain what escapement is. Escapement is basically the number of fish that get beyond the commercial fishery. So this lake here, Naknek Lake, eventually the water from that drains into the Bering Sea, and that's where the commercial fishing takes place. And the technology to catch fish is so good that they could virtually catch every fish if they wanted to. So the Alaska Department of Fish and Game makes sure that enough fish escape up into these watersheds each and every year to sustain the salmon population, because you don't want to wipe it out. You want to make sure that it's sustainable, the fishery that is. So salmon are coming back each and every year. This year, or I should say, that average escapement was 1.8 million fish. This year, the escapement for the Naknek drainage was, I think, 930,000 some fish. I can't remember the exact number. So it was definitely less than what we experienced during the past 20 years or so. So that has an impact on some of the bears. If some of the bears find the fishing more difficult along the Brooks River, for instance, they may go elsewhere. So it's certainly true that if we do see less bears along the river and less salmon, those things definitely have a direct correlation with one another. There's probably a very strong, I think, direct relationship between the number of bears and the number of salmon. More salmon equals more bears. But this year, the numbers of bears are within the average range for the numbers of bears, I think, that we've seen over the past 10 to 15 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not out of the ordinary. Even in years where we've had more fish in the river, there's been years where we've had about this number of bears or so.
And winters and other things come into play in determining the survival of bears. And I think one thing to keep in mind is that we had a lot of cubs this year. So that means that even though there were slightly depressed numbers of fish, there was enough food for these females to successfully overwinter, have the eggs that were fertilized in the summer implant, gestate into cubs over the last winter. So even though the numbers of the salmon were down, there was still plenty to bring us a bunch of cubs. I mean, what were we up to this year?
I
nine,
can't remember.
9 or 10, 11,
it was definitely
something
more
like
than
that.
2012.
Yeah. So, population dynamics can be pretty complicated. Usually, you can find one element that has a really strong influence, but it's not the only influence. So salmon, incredibly important. Severity of the winter, incredibly important. How late did the winter go? What was the berry crop like to help get them through the time of the year when there aren't as many salmon around? Any number of things. We have biologists in the park, and there are biologists elsewhere in the state of Alaska that are always watching these things. And I don't think there's any reason, for anybody to be alarmed right now. During the same period, McNeil River has seen their population of bears climb pretty drastically. And if you look at all animal populations over the long term, you'll see these ups and downs, pretty much with the exception of humans. We're the ones that tend to just keep going up. The other animals tend to do these wavy things where there's big years, and then there's years without many, and then back up again. You see that with caribou, you see it with rabbits, you see it with wolves.
And salmon. Especially.
Yeah.
And I should mention, too, that there's really, the Brooks River is really only just one stream in Katmai.
Yeah.
So if there's less fish in the Brooks River, that doesn't mean there's less fish throughout the whole watershed. Perhaps one of the other streams in the area got more salmon this year. And the bears know that there's many places to get salmon. So if they're not finding success at the Brooks River, then maybe they're trying some other spot. And question 12 on our list here is about Charlie Russell. And if you're not familiar with Charlie Russell, he's an author who has written many, many books about bears. And I think I've only read just one of his books, and it was many years ago, so I can't really remember too many specifics about it. But the question asks if we agree or disagree with his views on bears. Charlie Russell, the question continues, is an advocate for peaceful human-bear coexistence, and he also says that bears aren't as dangerous as commonly thought. And the way that's worded in our queue here, from what I'm reading with, I would agree with that. I don't think bears are as dangerous as what you will popularly find in movies or some other media outlets besides the Explore.org, where if you watch a movie, bears are always really, really dangerous. But if you give bears space, I don't really, and they don't have
what
access
he's doing
to
though
food.
is not. He's the one that advocates going up and sitting on the edge of the river with them and that kind of peaceful coexistence with them.
Okay.
There's really not the space that the Park Service and most bear biologists would agree is necessary. He's not giving them that.
Okay.
But the last statement about they aren't as dangerous as the public at large believes, I think is 100% true, because you can coexist with them as long as you are willing to modify your activities to make sure they don't get food, you don't get too close to them, you don't mess with their young. But a lot of the things, and I'm simplifying the work of Charlie, but a lot of the things he does just involves getting way too close to the bears, and so the Park Service definitely is not an advocate for that kind of bear interaction. It typically does not end well.
And we definitely here at Katmai National Park emphasize that people view bears in an appropriate manner. There's really not much of a reason to get close, just to be close. Brooks Camp, I think both Roy and I are really lucky to work there because it offers you really remarkable opportunities to watch bears up close and personal without necessarily invading their space. We have viewing platforms there. There are many other places in Katmai National Park where people can go and view bears. And oftentimes they do get very, very close. But we always try to emphasize to people to give the bears adequate space to go about their business. And that's a minimum of 50 yards, but in many other instances you may need to give them more. And if you can view bears at a distance, let's say you can go up on a nice hillside and you can look down on a meadow where bears happen to be, that's really maybe the best way to do it. You don't need to be down in the middle of the bear's food source, for instance, to watch these animals. You should really be finding places where you can go and view bears from a distance so they have as much room to move about as they need to.
The next question is, do you have a personal favorite? And that's always a tough one to answer because, our favorites change over time. Some bears that we maybe enjoyed watching a lot for one reason or another aren't here anymore. They've moved on to another river, or perhaps they've died. I don't have a problem answering and saying that I've actually got a couple of favorites, and maybe that's cheating. But I like them for different reasons. It's not like one bear is so important to me that I have this strong connection with it. I like a bear like Backpack because I like the story that Backpack can tell. I like Ted because I think his behavior is interesting and funny. All that begging. I also like the fact that I can pick him out all the way across the lower river with that scar on his back. I like some of the females because I like watching them interact with their cubs. So it's my favorites change over time depending on what the bears are doing and just how I'm feeling at the moment. But they, you always have to keep in mind that even though I might enjoy those bears and consider them to be favorites, they're still wild animals, and you have to be willing to accept that bad things may happen to them sometime too. So maybe you don't want to try to get too attached to them.
And I'm most interested, I think, in the stories that the bears tell. So maybe not necessarily on the individuals, but what the individuals tell me, for instance. So I do like to get to know certain bears really well, like number 89 Backpack, because we knew him as a cub. And now he's sort of ascending the hierarchy of the bears along the Brooks River. I like to see how some of these other younger bears are fitting into that hierarchy as well, and how some of the older bears are sort of falling out of the hierarchy as well.
We've talked about Backpack before, but I know that we might have some new people today. Just a brief synopsis of his story. He was born in the spring, or winter rather, of 2006, had a wonderful year that summer at Brooks Camp, got his nickname, and it's not typical to nickname a cub, or definitely not give him a number, but we nicknamed him Backpack because he had this habit of riding around on his mother's back. And his mother was Holly, who's also a bear that's still around. So they were just adorable that summer. When they came back in the summer of 2007, Backpack had what appeared to be a broken leg. And there were a lot of people suggesting that we euthanize him, put him out of his misery, because they thought he wasn't going to make it. And as we've talked about already, that's not Park Service policy to interfere with nature like that. So we tried to educate people and talk about how bears have this tremendous ability to heal themselves, how that broken leg is not a death sentence, especially if that bear learns everything he can, applies himself, studies hard, stays in school, all of that stuff. And that's what happened. Holly was able to nurture him through that summer, get him to the den. He knitted himself back together, showed up in 2008 with maybe a little bit of a limp still, but looking really good, and made it through that year and the next year, when he was away from his mother the first time as a subadult. And so it's just been really neat to see that from the time he was a little tiny cub, like yay big, to now being one of the up-and-coming males at the falls. And my great dream one day is to see him standing like up at the lip of the falls fishing with the big boys, and know that he's this wonderful poster child of the strength and perseverance and determination of bears, and this remarkable ability they have to heal.
So question 14 here. This one's about the Dumpling Mountain Cam, and if you're not familiar with that cam, I think you should go to it every once in a while because you really get to see some amazing stuff on the dumpling cam. And this question is about maybe some of the birds that fly
You
by
see
on there.
rain today.
Yeah, so it's not really a nice view up there
Ducks.
today. If I was thinking about hiking up here on a day like today, I probably would postpone it to a better weather day. But people are wondering what types of birds could be possibly seen flying on the Dumpling Mountain cam. The cam doesn't really stream like you have up at Brooks Falls, and it's looking at such a wide landscape that it's doubtful you're going to see a lot of small songbirds flying on by on there. So if you're going to see birds on the Dumpling cam and they look large, they're probably either going to be ravens or bald eagles. You do have golden
Cranes this time of the year.
cranes. Oh, yeah, that's true. And occasionally some geese will be migrating through the area, but you know the cranes if you heard them because oftentimes you hear them before you even see them.
Yeah.
So that's another thing to look for. But you're not going to really be seeing songbirds on the Dumpling Mountain cam, and almost all the songbirds have migrated out of that area. And really, none of the resident songbirds that are here year-round are going to be hanging up on the top of Dumpling Mountain. They're going to be moving to lower elevations. Even things like snow buntings, they'll be moving down to lower elevations, even around the King Salmon area where we are right now. So look for ravens, look for bald eagles that might be moving through, some migratory birds like cranes as well. We do have golden eagles in the park, but I've only been lucky enough to see maybe 2 golden eagles over the past few years. So there's really not a whole lot of golden eagles in the area, at least from what I have seen. We have many more bald eagles, even on the top of Dumpling Mountain. It seems like when I go up there, I'm much more likely to see a bald eagle than I am a golden eagle. So let's see, this next question here, this one's about me in a way. It says, Ranger Mike stated something that hit me like a ton of bricks yesterday, and this person would just like some clarification. He said that you saw a 402 with 2 cubs, and then something to the effect of, we may have had 2 cubs die this week. So we know about 1 cub for sure that happened to die, because that was the one that was found up at Lake Brooks. That was the one that we collected and took to town and did the necropsy on, and we talked about that earlier on in the chat. So 402 was around the other day, and I was 95% sure I was looking at her, and she only had 2 cubs, when the week before she had 3. So if what I was trying to suggest is that there could have been 2 different cubs die from 2 different separate litters. So that's quite possible. It just happened to happen in the same week. But we did have not only 1 bear with spring cubs this year, there were many bears with spring cubs this season. So different litters could have lost different cubs, even if it was close to the same period of time.
So I was trying to get prepped for, you might know these numbers offhand, but I
Okay.
was trying to get prepped for the next
Okay.
question, which is, can you tell us the age of some of the bears that we see often, especially Flo and Beadnose? And I was trying to get to them in our book here, which has, it will tell us the year that the bear was first seen at Brooks Camp and what its life stage was. It won't say that Otis is 18 or Otis is 20 years old. It'll say, what does it say? We were just looking at that yesterday.
Yeah, so with...
Well, we'll do with Beadnose first. So.
Yeah, so with number...
So Beadnose was classified as a subadult in 1999.
And a subadult is a bear that's independent of its mother, but is not a fully mature bear. So somewhere after they get kicked out of mom, or once mom kicks them away, of course, there's a few years of their life where they're not fully mature yet. So they're about 2.5 years old to 5.5 years old or so. And that's what we call a subadult bear. And she was within that age range in 1999. So I'd have to go back and look specifically through our notebooks to see if there's any hint on whether or not people thought she was a younger subadult bear in 1999 or an older subadult bear. So we don't really know for sure, but we know she was within that age range. So you could say in 1999 she was 2.5 to 5.5 years old or so. With number 438, Flo, I think it says
1999 is an adult.
As an adult female. And there's also a suggestion in some of our notes as well that say that this bear might have been around in 1997 with yearling cubs. And most of the bears here in Katmai aren't going to have cubs until they're 7, 8 years of old, or 8 years old in many cases. So she could be a fairly old bear by this point. If she was, a minimum of 6 years of age when she had cubs, And if that was the same bear in 1997, then she could be one of the older females that we have in the area right now.
And Otis, we get asked a lot about Otis because his behavior makes him look really, really old, and his teeth.
Yeah, and he's number 480, and if I remember correctly, he was an older subadult bear in 2001, I believe. So
I'm looking to see if we have that in here.
yeah, I'm not sure.
It's not in our book here.
The new version of the book will have it.
This is a very abbreviated version of these stacks of books, which we could have brought the stacks of books out to put the computer on that is providing the video feed for us today, because they're 3-ring binders that are about this thick, one for each July and each September of each year. And we've been doing this kind of documentation for 15 years.
Really
Something like-
specific stuff since, I think 2001 or something like that.
So,
And then-
I mean, they're like this tall, the stacks of those 3-ring binders. So this book is abbreviated because we didn't want to make it an incredibly huge file, just to try to make it useful for people, keep it concise. But we may have to go look that up. And I know in the new version of the book, we're trying to get all of the years that we first saw the bear in there, and then were they a young subadult, an old subadult, all of the stuff that he just mentioned.
And we can't put every bear in the books because some bears are only seen once. There's really not much, and we don't have, or we may not have any pictures of it. So the book itself really just highlights the most commonly seen bears along the Brooks River. So what you're watching on the cams, when you see a bear, don't assume that it's in one of our books because it's quite likely that it's not. I think the book only has maybe 50 bears
50,
or so, or something
yeah.
like that, and we routinely see more bears than that each and every year.
And then Otis, did you mention?
Uh,
Otis, we think
yeah.
is probably like 18 or 20.
Yeah, he was an I think an older subadult, young adult bear in 2001, if I remember correctly.
And so the oldest bear that we know of right now, that we think right now, is it going to be 410?
It might be. I can't think of a bear that we would have a good record of that would be old.
Yeah, I can't either right now. So 410, a female, one of the largest females, and probably if the camera were to pan out to the spit, there's a good chance she's sleeping out there because she spends a lot of time sleeping. She doesn't need to eat anymore. She's huge. She's probably the oldest female, and I think the interesting thing about that is the fact that she was still mating this year. So she's probably around 30 years old and still mating, and I don't know what that is in people years, but 85, 90 years old, something like that. She's getting up there in years. And
Unlike people, there doesn't seem to be any evidence that bears become senescent as they age. So
you want to define that word for everybody?
Basically, that means they're unable to reproduce beyond a certain age.
Remember, this was the kids' chat today.
Sorry. So with many organisms, they get too old, they can no longer reproduce. It happens in humans. It doesn't seem to really happen in bears. So no matter how old you happen to be, bears seems to be
mostly the health.
Yeah. It can definitely affect their lifespan, though, because if you're an older bear and you have cubs, that's going to be extremely taxing on you, extremely hard on your body. It's really, really hard to care for cubs when you're a younger bear, let alone when you're an older bear. You may have a lot of experience caring for cubs and protecting them, and you know where a lot of good food resources are, but it still takes a tremendous amount of energy to care for those cubs. So older bears with cubs actually have a lower survival rate than than a female who's younger without cubs, especially. So if you're an older bear like 410 and you come back with cubs, that may be very, very hard on you, and you have less of a chance surviving upcoming winters and springtimes while you're caring for those animals.
Okay, well, it's 3:00 now according to our clock, so that's been an hour that we've been chatting, and we've gotten to what appears to be all the questions that have come in so far, because no more have loaded onto our screen. And I guess at this point we should take this opportunity to mention that we intend to do more of these chats throughout the winter. We won't do them with the same frequency that we've been doing them in the last month, because we're not out there, and because there's not a lot that's changing in the bear's behavior right now. It's all just preparing for hibernation. I think we're going to try to do another one toward the end of the month of October, because we will have had another month that we can be watching these bears, and maybe by then we will see snow. We might see some bears we haven't seen already, because there's some that only show up when things really quiet down at Brooks Camp. But it's a great chance for us to see this window into the to the bears' lives that we don't usually get to see because we're not out there. We're closing up camp. In fact, tomorrow we intend to take the floating bridge out. So make sure.
Oh, we almost forgot to mention.
Yeah, make sure that if you're around tomorrow, as soon as we know they're about to start it, we'll send out a tweet and a Facebook update so you can tune in for that. That's usually pretty interesting to see the techniques that our maintenance crew uses to get the bridge out of the water. But once they pull out of there, it's just the webcams and the bears and the other animals. So it's really fascinating for us to see what happens. I'm not sure if the next chats will be part of the Disney Nature Wildlife Wednesdays. We'll figure that out, I guess, in the coming days and weeks. And if you were wondering about this connection between the National Park Service, Katmai National Park, and Disney Nature, that came about because of the new film that Disney Nature is producing called Disney Nature Bears. That film has been filmed in Katmai over the last 2 summers and part of the winter, as well as Lake Clark National Park and other locations in Alaska and elsewhere. And it's a new film that's coming out this spring on Earth Day. And if you go see the film during the opening week, a proceed of each ticket sales will be donated to the National Park Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of the National Park Service. So if you go see it that week, a percentage of that will go to the National Park Foundation, which will then use that money to fund educational efforts on bears in national parks like Katmai, Yellowstone, Yosemite, maybe Great Smoky Mountains. Parks will be applying to use that money. For education, for habitat restoration, research, any number of things. And so we hope to continue this partnership with Disney Nature and Explore and the National Park Foundation over the winter, do some more of these chats in preparation for Disney Nature Bears premiering in the spring. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, have a good day, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.